A black armored convoy of 7 SUVs rolled through the sun-baked streets of Scottsdale, Arizona. The vehicles moved in perfect formation, their tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants inside. Pedestrians stopped and stared. Some pulled out their phones to record. A convoy like this meant someone important was passing through. Inside the middle vehicle sat a man named Dongju Park. His tailored navy suit fit him like a second skin. His dark hair was swept back from a face that had been hardened by years of difficult decisions. His hands rested on his knees, perfectly still. But inside, those hands wanted to shake. In exactly 12 minutes, Dongju would walk into a struggling breakfast diner. He would come face to face with the only woman he had ever loved. The woman who saved his life when he was nothing but a starving teenager with no family and no future. The woman he made a promise to 15 years ago. The woman who had no idea he was still alive. Dongju closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to where it all began. 15 years ago, Dongju was not powerful. He was not rich. He was not the kind of man who traveled in armored convoys with armed security. He was a 17-year-old Korean immigrant boy living in the back room of his parents' dry cleaning shop in one of the roughest neighborhoods in Cleveland, Ohio. His parents, Jin-ho and Mi-young Park, had come to America with nothing but dreams and determination. They worked 18-hour days. They saved every penny. They learned English from television shows and customer interactions. They wanted Dongju to go to college and become something greater than them. Jin-ho used to say, "In Korea, we were nobody. In America, you can be anybody. That is why we came here, for you." Dongju believed him. He studied hard. He worked in the shop after school. He planned to apply to business schools and make his parents proud. Then came the fire. The dry cleaning shop had started taking customers from a larger chain owned by a man named Gerald Whitmore. Whitmore did not appreciate the competition. He complained. He threatened. When Jin-ho refused to close his shop, Whitmore paid someone to make the problem go away. On a cold November night, while Jin-ho and Mi-young were inside doing late-night inventory, someone poured gasoline around the back of the building and lit a match. Dongju was at the library studying for a chemistry test. He came home to find fire trucks and police cars and a crowd of neighbors standing in the street, watching his entire life burn to the ground. His parents never made it out. The fire department ruled it an accident. Faulty wiring, they said. Old building, they said. Nothing suspicious, they said. But Dongju knew the truth. He had heard Whitmore's threats. He had seen the fear in his father's eyes. He knew that his parents had been taken from him deliberately and cruelly. And he could do nothing about it. At 17 years old, Dongju became homeless overnight. He had no family in America. His parents' small savings account was frozen pending an investigation that would take months. He had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. For 3 weeks, he slept under bridges and in abandoned buildings. He ate from dumpsters. He watched the world continue spinning while his had stopped completely. By the time December arrived, Dongju was ready to give up. The cold had seeped into his bones. He had not eaten in 4 days. His lips were blue and his fingers were numb, and he had started to wonder if dying would really be so bad. That was when he met Felicia Monroe. Felicia was 16 years old and worked at her grandmother's soul food restaurant after school. Grandma Monroe's kitchen was a Cleveland institution, a tiny restaurant that served the best fried chicken and collard greens in the neighborhood. Felicia had been helping out there since she was old enough to carry plates. On that freezing December evening, Felicia was taking out the trash when she heard a sound coming from behind the dumpster. At first, she thought it was an animal, a stray cat or a raccoon looking for scraps. But when she looked closer, she saw a boy. He was curled up on a piece of cardboard, his thin jacket pulled tight around his shivering body. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. He looked like he was waiting to die. Most people would have walked past. The neighborhood had plenty of homeless people, and most folks had learned to look the other way. It was easier that way, safer. Felicia did not walk past. She ran back inside the restaurant and grabbed a container of hot food. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, collard greens, a biscuit. She wrapped it all up and brought it out to the boy behind the dumpster. "Hey," she said softly, kneeling down beside him. "Hey, wake up, you need to eat something." Dongju opened his eyes. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. There was an angel standing over him, holding a container of food that smelled like heaven. "Take it," the angel said. "It is hot, you need to eat." Dongju was too weak to argue. He took the container with trembling hands and started eating. The food was the best thing he had ever tasted, not because of how it was prepared, but because of what it represented. Kindness, hope, someone who saw him as a human being instead of a problem to be ignored. When he finished eating, he looked up at the girl who had saved his life. "Thank you," he whispered. "What is your name?" she asked. Dongju Park." "I am Felicia Monroe. My grandmother owns this restaurant." She studied his face with concern. "How long have you been out here?" 3 weeks. "Where is your family?" "Gone. My parents died in a fire." Felicia's expression softened with genuine sorrow. "I am so sorry." She stood up and looked around, thinking. "Listen, I cannot take you inside. My grandmother would not allow it. But I can bring you food every night after we close. And there is a shelter on the other side of downtown that might have beds available." "The shelters are full," Dongju said quietly. "I have tried." Felicia bit her lip. "Then I will figure something out, but you cannot stay out here. You will freeze to death." Over the next 6 months, Felicia Monroe became Dongju Park's lifeline. She brought him a plate of hot food every single night. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, she never missed a single evening. She used her own tip money to buy him a coat, a real winter coat with insulation and a hood. It was used and a little worn, but it was warm. She helped him find odd jobs in the neighborhood, cleaning gutters, shoveling snow, moving furniture, anything that would put a few dollars in his pocket. She listened when he cried about his parents. She held his hand when the grief became too heavy to carry alone. She believed in him when he had stopped believing in himself. And she never once asked for anything in return. Dongju fell in love with her. How could he not? She was kind and brave and beautiful, and everything he thought had been burned away with his old life. But he never told her how he felt. How could he? He was homeless. He was broken. He had nothing to offer except gratitude and promises. Then one night, everything changed. Dongju received a letter. It was forwarded from his parents' old address to the post office box Felicia had helped him set up. The letter was from Korea, from an uncle he barely remembered. His father's older brother, a man named Park Sung-jin, had heard about the fire through old family contacts. He was offering Dongju a place to stay, a chance to start over, a home. Dongju stared at the letter for a long time. Korea. He had not been there since he was a small child. He barely spoke the language anymore. He had no idea what kind of life awaited him on the other side of the world. But he also knew he could not stay in Cleveland. There was nothing left for him here except painful memories and a girl he could never deserve. On his last night in America, Dongju sat with Felicia behind the dumpster where she had found him. The same spot where his life had been saved by a container of fried chicken and a 16-year-old girl with a kind heart. He held her hands and looked into her eyes. "I am going to find my uncle in Korea," he told her. "He is the only family I have left. But I will come back for you, Felicia, I promise you. When I become someone who deserves you, I will come back, and I will marry you." Felicia laughed and cried at the same time. Tears streamed down her cheeks, catching the light from the street lamps. "You are crazy," she said. "I am serious." Dongju squeezed her hands tighter. "Wait for me." "How long?" "As long as it takes. I will become someone worthy of you. I will build a life that I can offer you without shame. And then I will come back and I will keep my promise." Felicia looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was their first kiss, soft and sad and full of all the words they did not know how to say. "I will wait," she whispered against his lips. Dongju left Cleveland that night. He hitchhiked to New York. He used the last of his money to buy a one-way ticket to Seoul. He landed in a country he did not remember, carrying nothing but a backpack and a promise. For 15 years, Felicia heard nothing. She wrote letters to the address Dongju gave her, but they were all returned unopened. She tried to find information about Park Sung-jin, but the name was too common and her resources were too limited. She hired a private investigator once, but the trail went cold in Seoul. Eventually, Felicia came to a painful conclusion. Dongju was dead. It was the only explanation that made sense. He would never have abandoned her. He would never have broken his promise without a reason. Something must have happened to him in Korea, something terrible and final. She grieved for him. She lit candles on the anniversary of their last night together. She kept his memory alive in her heart, even as she forced herself to move forward with her life. By the time she turned 24, Felicia had convinced herself that it was time to let go. And that was when Craig Hendricks walked into her grandmother's restaurant and changed everything. What Felicia never knew was that Dongju had not died in Korea. He had transformed. His uncle, Park Sung-jin, was not just any man. He was the second in command of one of Korea's most powerful underground organizations. The kind of organization that moved money and influence across borders like water flowing downhill. The kind of organization that made governments nervous and competitors disappear. When Dongju arrived in Seoul with nothing but rage in his heart and a promise on his lips, his uncle saw something in him, something dangerous, something useful, something that could be shaped and sharpened into a weapon. "You have lost everything," Sung-jin told him on his first night in Korea. "That kind of loss can destroy a man, or it can make him invincible. Which will you choose?" Dongju chose invincibility. Over the next 15 years, he climbed the ranks of his uncle's organization with brutal efficiency. He learned to fight. He learned to negotiate. He learned to command respect through strength and intelligence. He learned to make deals that benefited everyone and enemies that regretted crossing him. When his uncle retired, Dongju took his place. He also avenged his parents' deaths. Gerald Whitmore, the man who had ordered the fire, had expanded his dry cleaning empire into a regional chain. He thought he had gotten away with murder. He thought the past was buried along with Jin-ho and Mi-young Park. He was wrong. Dongju did not have Whitmore taken care of. That would have been too easy. Instead, he destroyed him financially. He bought Whitmore's debts. He pressured his suppliers. He exposed his tax evasion to federal investigators. He watched from afar as Gerald Whitmore lost everything he had built and spent his final years working minimum-wage jobs and living in a one-bedroom apartment. Justice was served, cold and complete. But through all of those years, through all of those battles and victories and transformations, Dongju never forgot Cleveland. He never forgot the dumpster. He never forgot her. He kept tabs on Felicia through private investigators and digital surveillance. He watched her graduate from community college. He watched her take over the restaurant when her grandmother's health declined. He watched her grandmother pass away and leave her the business. He watched her get married. That day was the hardest of his life, harder than losing his parents, harder than any fight he had ever faced. He stood in his Seoul penthouse, holding a surveillance photo of Felicia in a wedding dress, and felt his heart break all over again. He had taken too long. He had waited too many years. He had lost her. For almost 7 years, Dongju convinced himself that it was over. Felicia had moved on. She was married. She was living her life. He had no right to disrupt that, no matter what he had promised. But then, his investigators brought him new information. Information about her husband. Information that made Dongju's blood run cold. And now he was here. Scottsdale, Arizona, where Felicia had relocated after her grandmother died and left her a second restaurant location, where she was living with a man who was not what he pretended to be. The convoy stopped. Dongju stepped out into the Arizona sun. He looked up at the faded sign of a small diner called Grandma Monroe's Kitchen. The paint was peeling. The windows needed washing, but the smell of good food still drifted through the door. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he had been building toward for 15 years. He pushed open the door. The bell chimed. And there she was. 31 years old, tired eyes with dark circles underneath them, a worn apron stained with grease and hard work, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, lines around her mouth that had not been there when she was 16. But still beautiful, still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Felicia was carrying a pot of coffee toward a table of customers. She turned toward the door when the bell rang, ready to greet whoever was coming in with the same warm smile she gave everyone. The smile died on her face. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the floor, sending hot liquid and broken glass everywhere. But Felicia did not move. She did not look down. She just stared at the man standing in her doorway like she was seeing a ghost. Because she was. "Dongju," she breathed. And that was when Dongju noticed something that made his stomach drop. Standing behind the counter, watching them both with cold and possessive eyes, was a man wearing a wedding ring. And so was Felicia. "Before we continue, let me ask you something. If someone you loved made you a promise and then disappeared for 15 years without a word, would you wait for them? Or would you move on? Think about it. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happens when Dongju discovers who this man really is and what he has done to Felicia, then hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Because what happens next changes everything." For exactly 7 seconds, nobody in Grandma Monroe's kitchen moved or spoke. The customers at the 2 occupied tables stared at the broken coffee pot and the woman standing frozen in the middle of the floor. The man behind the counter narrowed his eyes at the stranger in the expensive suit, and Felicia just kept staring at a face she had convinced herself she would never see again. "Dongju," she repeated louder this time. The name landed like a bomb in the quiet diner. The man behind the counter stepped forward. His name was Craig Hendricks. He was 38 years old, with sandy brown hair and the kind of good looks that photographers loved and accountants trusted. He had been married to Felicia for 6 years. And he recognized the name Dongju, because Felicia used to whisper it in her sleep during the first 3 years of their marriage. Craig had hated that name before he ever knew it belonged to a real person. He had always known there was someone in his wife's past that she had never fully let go of. Someone who haunted her dreams and made her look sad when she thought no one was watching. Now that someone was standing in his diner. And something about the way this man carried himself, the way his suit fit him, the way his eyes took in the room like he was cataloging threats, told Craig that this was not just some old friend stopping by to say hello. This was a problem. Dongju ignored Craig completely. His eyes stayed locked on Felicia as he stepped further into the restaurant. "You moved from Cleveland," he said. His voice was deeper than she remembered, more confident. "My grandmother died." Felicia's voice cracked slightly. "She left me this place. I could not afford to keep the Cleveland location open too. I went to Cleveland first, 3 weeks ago. The building is a cell phone store now." He came looking for her. After 15 years of silence, he actually came looking for her. Felicia felt something hot and complicated rising in her chest. It was part relief, and part anger, and part grief, and part joy, and she did not know which emotion to feel first. 15 years, no letter, no phone call, nothing. She thought he was dead. She grieved him. She finally forced herself to move on, and now he was standing in front of her like no time had passed at all. "You need to leave." Craig stepped out from behind the counter, positioning himself between Dongju and Felicia. Dongju finally looked at Craig, and Craig immediately wished he had stayed behind that counter. Because the way this man looked at him was the way a lion might look at something small and annoying that was blocking its path. "Who are you?" Dongju asked. His voice was calm, almost bored. "I am her husband." The word husband hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Dongju's expression did not change. His posture did not shift, but something moved behind his eyes, something dark and patient and deeply unhappy. "I see," Dongju said. He turned back to Felicia. "Is this what you wanted?" Felicia's hands were trembling. She looked down at them and saw that she was still holding the handle of the shattered coffee pot. She set it carefully on the nearest table. "You left me." Her voice was stronger now, fueled by years of suppressed anger. "You disappeared. You never even tried to contact me. What was I supposed to do? Wait forever?" "Yes." The answer was so simple, so absolute, that Felicia did not know what to say. Craig stepped forward again, his chest puffed out in what he probably thought was an intimidating display. "Listen, buddy, I do not know who you think you are, but she is my wife. This is my diner, and you need to leave before I call the police." Dongju looked at Craig for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Craig tensed. Felicia gasped. The customers at the nearby tables shrank back in their seats. But what Dongju pulled out was not a weapon. It was a small velvet box, black and worn at the edges, like it had been handled thousands of times over many years. He set it on the counter with a soft click. "This is the ring I was supposed to give you 15 years ago," he said to Felicia. "I have carried it every single day since I left Cleveland. I bought it with the first money I ever earned doing honest work. It was going to be my promise made solid." He looked at Craig. "You are right, she is your wife, for now." Craig's face reddened with anger, but before he could respond, Dongju turned and walked toward the door. "Dongju, wait," Felicia called out. He stopped with his hand on the door handle. He did not turn around. "I am staying at the Phoenician resort for the next 30 days. If you want answers, you know where to find me." He pushed open the door and walked out. The bell chimed again, almost cheerfully, as if it did not understand the magnitude of what had just happened. Felicia stared at the velvet box on the counter. Craig stared at Felicia, staring at the velvet box. The customers stared at both of them, probably wondering if they were going to have an interesting story to tell their friends later. "Who the hell was that?" Craig demanded. "Someone from my past," Felicia said quietly. "From before I met you. The Korean, guy you used to dream about." Felicia did not answer. She could not answer, because the truth was too complicated and too painful to explain in the middle of a diner full of curious customers. "Clean this mess up," Craig said, gesturing at the broken coffee pot and the spreading puddle of liquid on the floor. "I have to make some calls." He walked into the back office and shut the door behind him. Felicia heard the lock click. She stood there for a moment, surrounded by broken glass and cooling coffee, and wondered how her simple, predictable life had just become so incredibly complicated. That night, after the diner closed, Felicia sat alone in the storage room behind the kitchen. The velvet box sat on her lap. She had not opened it yet. She was almost afraid to. Finally, she lifted the lid. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, tiny diamond. The kind of ring a poor teenage boy might have saved for months to buy with money earned from odd jobs and manual labor. It was the most beautiful ring she had ever seen. But there was something else inside the box. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and worn soft at the creases. She pulled it out carefully and unfolded it. The note was written in handwriting she recognized immediately. Dongju's handwriting. The same handwriting from the letters he used to leave for her in their secret spot behind the dumpster. The note read, "I will come back for you, and when I do, I will never leave again. I promise." Felicia felt tears streaming down her face. She had thought he was dead. She had grieved him. She had forced herself to move on because she believed there was no other choice. But he had been alive this whole time. He had kept the ring. He had kept the promise. At least he had tried to. She was about to close the box when she noticed something else. Something hidden in the lining of the velvet interior. A slight bulge that did not quite fit with the box's construction. She pried at the lining carefully and found a thin envelope tucked inside. Her heart pounding, she opened the envelope and pulled out what was inside. A photograph, recent, based on the clarity and the printing quality. The photograph showed two men shaking hands in front of a golf course clubhouse. One of them was her husband, Craig. The other was a man she recognized. His face had been all over the news 2 years ago. Martin Graves. He had been arrested for running an insurance fraud scheme that left dozens of families bankrupt. He was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. In the photograph, Craig was smiling at Martin like they were old friends, like they had known each other for years, like they trusted each other completely. Craig had told Felicia he was a sales consultant before they met. He said his previous business partners were all legitimate. He said his past was boring and uncomplicated. He lied. Felicia sat in the storage room, holding the photograph in her shaking hands, and felt her entire understanding of her marriage crumbling around her. If Craig lied about knowing a convicted criminal, what else had he been hiding? And why did Dongju have this photograph? How did he know about Craig's secrets? More importantly, what else did he know? Felicia did not sleep that night. She lay in bed next to Craig, listening to him snore, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. Her mind would not stop racing. Questions tumbled over each other like rocks in a landslide. How did Dongju get that photograph? Why did Craig lie about knowing Martin Graves? What was Craig's real connection to the insurance fraud scheme? And perhaps most importantly, what was Dongju now? What had he become in those 15 years? The suit he was wearing, the convoy of vehicles, the way he carried himself like a man who was used to being obeyed. None of that matched the hungry, broken teenager she had fed behind the dumpster. He had said he would become someone who deserved her. It looked like he had become something else entirely. The next morning, Felicia told Craig she needed to run errands in Paradise Valley. He barely looked up from his phone, just grunted in acknowledgement and waved her toward the door. She noticed how he angled the screen away from her. She noticed how he waited until she was almost out of the house before he started typing. She had noticed these things for years. She just never questioned them before. Now she questioned everything. The Phoenician Resort was one of the most expensive properties in the Scottsdale area. It sprawled across the base of Camelback Mountain like a palace designed by someone who had unlimited money and exquisite taste. The lobby alone made Felicia feel painfully out of place. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers everywhere. Staff members in crisp uniforms moving silently and efficiently. Guests who probably spent more on a single night here than Felicia made in a month. She stood just inside the entrance, wearing her nicest jeans and a blouse she had owned for 3 years, and wondered what the hell she was doing here. Then she saw Dongju. He was waiting for her near a fountain in the center of the lobby. He was wearing a simple black shirt and gray pants. No suit this time, no obvious display of wealth. He looked almost normal, almost like the boy she used to know. "You came," he said as she approached. "I need answers." "I know." He gestured toward a private terrace off the main lobby. "We can talk out there, more private." They walked together past curious staff members and wealthy guests, through a set of glass doors, and out onto a stone terrace that overlooked the mountains. The view was stunning. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and orange. Dongju ordered tea from an attentive server. Felicia shook her head when offered something. She could not imagine putting anything in her stomach right now. When they were alone, she pulled out the photograph and slid it across the table toward him. "You left this in the ring box." Dongju nodded. "How do you have a photograph of my husband with a convicted criminal?" Dongju looked at her with something in his eyes that might have been pity. "Because I have been investigating Craig Hendricks for the past 3 months. Since the moment I discovered you were married to him." Felicia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "Why? Why would you investigate my husband?" "Because I never stopped watching over you, Felicia, even when I could not be here, even when I convinced myself that you had moved on and I should let you be happy. I kept track of your life. I needed to know you were safe." He paused. "When I found out you had married, I had my people look into Craig. Standard background check. I wanted to make sure you were with someone good, someone who deserved you. And what I found made me get on a plane immediately. Dongju reached into a bag beside his chair and pulled out a thick folder. He placed it on the table in front of her. Craig Hendricks is not a sales consultant. He has never been a sales consultant, and he did not meet you by accident. Felicia opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents, bank records, photographs, court filings, background reports, pages and pages of information about a man she had been married to for 6 years. Dongju walked her through it slowly, explaining each piece. Craig Hendricks had been married 3 times before Felicia. Each of his previous wives owned small businesses: a florist shop in Tampa, a boutique in Nashville, a bed and breakfast in Charleston. Each of those women signed over financial control to Craig within 2 years of marriage. He was charming. He was helpful. He offered to handle the books so they could focus on what they loved. And each of those women lost everything. Craig systematically drained their accounts. He took out loans in their names without their knowledge. He ran up debts and transferred assets into shell companies. When there was nothing left to take, the marriages fell apart. 3 women, 3 businesses, 3 financial ruins, and Craig walked away from each one with money in his pocket and no legal consequences. He is a con artist, Dongju said quietly. A very good one. He finds vulnerable women with valuable assets, marries them, and bleeds them dry. Felicia shook her head. That is not possible. He loves me. He has been a good husband. Even as she said the words, she knew they sounded hollow. Craig had never been cruel to her, but he had never been particularly loving either. Their marriage was comfortable, practical, like a business arrangement more than a romance. Now she understood why. Dongju pulled out another document. According to records I obtained from various sources, Craig has already taken out several loans against your diner without your knowledge. He forged your signature on 3 separate occasions. The total debt is currently $437,000. Felicia felt like she had been punched in the stomach. That is more than the diner is worth. Exactly. In approximately 6 months, when those loans come due, you will default. The bank will seize the property. You will lose everything your grandmother built. And Craig will walk away, probably to find wife number 5. He targeted me. Felicia's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, he found out about your grandmother's restaurant through business databases. He researched your family. He waited for the right moment. He planned his approach down to the last detail. He showed up at your Cleveland location, pretending to be a lonely businessman passing through town. But he had been preparing for that meeting for months. Felicia stared at the documents spread out before her. The evidence was overwhelming. Everything Dongju was telling her made horrible, perfect sense. Craig's hesitation to have children, his insistence on handling all the finances, his occasional trips that he vaguely attributed to business opportunities, his habit of keeping his phone angled away from her. It all fit. Every piece of her marriage suddenly looked different when viewed through this new lens. I have been so stupid, she whispered. No, Dongju's voice was firm. You have been trusting, you have been kind. Those are not weaknesses, Felicia. They are what make you who you are. Craig exploited your goodness. That is his crime, not yours. She looked up at him. What do you want from me, Dongju? Why are you really here? I made you a promise 15 years ago. I said I would come back for you. I said I would marry you. I intend to keep that promise. I'm already married. To a criminal who is destroying your life. That marriage is based on lies and exploitation. It does not count. Felicia laughed bitterly. It does not count. I stood in a church and said vows. I have worn his ring for 6 years. I have shared his bed and his home and his life. You do not get to tell me it does not count. You are right, Dongju nodded slowly. I do not get to tell you anything. I can only tell you what I know. What you do with that information is your choice. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense and focused. But I want you to know something, Felicia. I never forgot you. Not for one single day in 15 years. Every decision I made, Every battle I fought, every success I achieved, it was all so that one day I could come back to you as someone worthy of your love. Then why did you never contact me? Why did you let me think you were dead? Dongju was quiet for a long moment. Because the world I entered in Korea was dangerous. The work I did, the enemies I made, the things I had to become, none of it was safe. If anyone had discovered that I cared about someone in America, they would have used you to hurt me. I could not risk that. I told myself that staying away was protecting you. And later, when you became powerful enough to protect me. By then, I was covered in too much darkness. I had done things, Felicia, things that would horrify you, things that would make you look at me differently. I did not want to bring that darkness into your life. I convinced myself that you were better off without me. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong about all of it. I should have found a way to contact you. I should have trusted you to understand. Instead, I let fear and shame keep me away while a predator moved in and started destroying everything you love. Felicia did not know what to say. 15 years of anger and grief were warring with 15 years of hope and love. She had thought she was over him. She had convinced herself that the teenage girl who loved Dongju Park was someone she had left behind. But sitting here, looking at him, listening to his explanations and his regrets, she realized that girl was still inside her. That girl had never stopped loving him. That girl had just learned to lock those feelings away in a box and pretend they did not exist. I need time, she said finally, to process all of this, to figure out what to do. Of course. Dongju reached into the folder and pulled out a card. This is my private number. Call me when you are ready, day or night. I will be here for the next 30 days. After that, I have business in Seoul that cannot wait, but I can extend my stay if you need more time. Felicia took the card. What am I supposed to do about Craig? I cannot just go home and pretend everything is normal. Actually, that is exactly what I need you to do, at least for now. Why? Because we do not have enough evidence yet. I know about the fraud and the forged signatures, but proving it in court requires documentation that Craig has likely hidden or destroyed. We need to gather more evidence before we make a move. He paused. There is also something else, something I have not told you yet. Felicia felt her blood go cold. What could possibly be worse than what you have already told me? Craig's business partner in the photograph, Martin Graves, the man who went to prison for insurance fraud. What about him? He was released from prison 4 months ago, early release for good behavior. He had been living in a halfway house in Phoenix, trying to rebuild his life. Dongju met her eyes directly. Last week, Martin Graves was found dead in his apartment. The official ruling was suicide, hanging. Felicia's hand flew to her mouth. According to visitor logs and security footage, Craig was the last person to visit Martin before he died. They met for approximately 45 minutes. Craig left. 6 hours later, Martin was dead. You think Craig? I think Martin Graves knew things about Craig that Craig did not want anyone else to know. I think Martin might have threatened to talk, maybe tried to blackmail Craig for money. And I think Craig decided that dead men tell no tales. Felicia stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a clatter. I need to go home. I need to confront him. Dongju grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. No, not yet. Why not? Because if you confront Craig before we have all the evidence, he will destroy it. He will transfer assets, delete files, cover his tracks. We will lose any chance of bringing him to justice. And if I stay with him, pretending everything is normal, while knowing he might be a murderer, I will have people watching you, around the clock. If Craig makes any threatening moves, they will intervene immediately. You will be protected. Felicia looked down at his hand on her wrist. His grip was warm and strong. How did you become this, Dongju? How did you go from the boy I fed behind the dumpster to whatever this is? That is a long story. I have time. Dongju released her wrist and gestured for her to sit back down. He ordered more tea, and then he told her everything. He told her about his uncle in Seoul and the criminal empire he inherited. He told her about the blood on his hands, and the enemies he had made. He told her about the power he had accumulated and the price he had paid for it. He did not hide anything. He did not make excuses. I am not a good man, Felicia. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. But everything I have become, everything I have built, it was all working toward one goal, coming back to you. Felicia listened to his story and felt her understanding of the world shifting and reforming. The boy she had loved was gone. In his place was a man who commanded criminal empires and spoke casually about enemies and power. But somewhere in that man, behind the expensive clothes and the dangerous confidence, she could still see the hungry teenager who had promised to marry her. I need to think, she said finally, about all of this, about what to do next. I understand. Dongju stood as she gathered her things. Be careful around Craig. Do not let him know anything has changed. And call me if anything feels wrong. Felicia nodded and walked toward the door of the terrace. She paused before leaving. Dongju. Yes. The ring. It is beautiful. Thank you for keeping it all these years. She saw something flicker in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or longing. Thank you for being worth keeping it for. For 3 days, Felicia played the role of dutiful wife. She cooked breakfast for Craig. She ran the diner with a smile on her face. She lay next to him at night and pretended to sleep while her mind raced with plans and fears. It was the hardest acting job of her life. Every time Craig smiled at her, she thought about the 3 women whose lives he had destroyed before her. Every time he kissed her cheek on his way out the door, she thought about Martin Graves hanging from a rope in his apartment. Every time she looked in the mirror, she wondered how she had been so blind. On the 4th night, Dongju's team intercepted a phone call. Craig was talking to someone on a burner phone, discussing financial transfers and deadline extensions. He mentioned the diner by name. He mentioned the loans. He mentioned that everything was proceeding according to plan. He also mentioned that he was getting suspicious about his wife's recent behavior. She has been distracted, Craig said on the call. Looking at me funny, I think she might have found something. Handle it, the voice on the other end replied. I always do. Felicia was at the Phoenician when Yi-Won played her the recording. She listened to her husband discussing her like she was a problem to be managed and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. We need to move faster, she said. He is going to figure it out. We need more evidence, Dongju replied. The financial fraud is documented, but the connection to Martin Graves is still circumstantial. Without solid proof that Craig was involved in his death, the best we can hope for is a few years in prison for fraud. He will be out before you know it. Then how do we get proof? Yi-Won stepped forward. We have assets inside the Phoenix Police Department. They can get us access to the Graves investigation files. If there is evidence linking Craig to the death, it will be in there. How long? 24 hours, maybe less. Felicia nodded. Fine, 24 hours. I can hold it together for that long. But she was wrong. That night, Felicia came home from the diner and found Craig waiting for her in the living room. All the lights were off. He was sitting in his favorite chair, facing the door with something in his hands. Her burner phone, the one Dongju had given her for secure communication. Want to tell me who Dongju is? Craig asked. His voice was calm, too calm, the voice of a man who had been rehearsing this conversation in his head. Felicia's heart pounded against her ribs. She thought about running. She thought about screaming, but her feet stayed rooted to the floor. He is an old friend, she managed. An old friend who texts you 20 times a day. An old friend you meet at expensive resorts. An old friend whose name you used to whisper in your sleep for the first 3 years of our marriage. Craig stood up slowly. He walked toward her, each step measured and deliberate. I am not stupid, Felicia. I know something is going on. I know you have been sneaking around. And I know you found something you should not have found. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same cologne she used to love. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Felicia looked at her husband, really looked at him, 6 years of marriage, and she was only now seeing him clearly. The charm that had attracted her was nothing but a mask. The kindness was calculation. The love was a transaction. She had been sleeping next to a monster and calling it comfort. Something inside her shifted. Fear gave way to anger. Uncertainty gave way to resolve. "I am going to destroy you," she said quietly. Craig laughed, but there was no humor in it, just cold amusement. "Baby, you have no idea who you are dealing with." He leaned in even closer, his breath warm on her face. "I have ruined women far smarter than you, and I have gotten away with it every single time. You think some old boyfriend from your past is going to save you. You think that little Korean man has any power in this country." He grabbed her chin, hard. His fingers dug into her jaw with bruising force. "You are mine, Felicia. Your diner is mine. Your grandmother's legacy is mine. And there is nothing you or your little friend can do about it." He released her and walked toward the door. "I am going out. When I get back, you better have that burner phone and whatever else you have been hiding laid out on the kitchen table. Or things are going to get very, very difficult for you." The door slammed shut behind him. Felicia stood in the darkened living room, her chin throbbing, her hands shaking, and her mind racing. She grabbed her real phone and called Dongju. "He knows," she whispered. "He found the burner. He knows something is happening. We need to move now." "Where is he?" "He left, said he would be back later." "Stay on the line. I am sending Yiwon to get you. Do not open the door for anyone except him." "Okay." But before Dongju could say anything else, Felicia heard a sound that made her blood freeze. The front door was opening again. Craig was back. And he was not alone. 2 men stepped through the door behind him. They were large, dressed in dark clothing, with the kind of flat expressions that suggested violence was not something they thought twice about. Craig smiled at Felicia, that charming smile she had once found so attractive. "Change of plans, baby. We are going for a drive." They blindfolded Felicia and shoved her into the back of an SUV before she could scream. One of the men zip-tied her hands behind her back. The other took her phone and dropped it on the driveway, crushing it under his heel. The drive seemed to last forever. Felicia tried to track the turns and listen for landmarks, but after 30 minutes she was completely disoriented. They could be anywhere. When the blindfold finally came off, she was in a warehouse. The space was large and mostly empty. Concrete floors, metal walls, industrial lighting that flickered occasionally. No windows that she could see, one door. Craig was sitting in a folding chair about 10 feet away, looking annoyingly relaxed. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand and a patient expression on his face. "Comfortable?" he asked. Felicia said nothing. She was sitting in another folding chair, her hands still tied behind her. Her chin throbbed from where Craig had grabbed her. Her wrists were starting to go numb. "Here is what is going to happen," Craig said conversationally. "Tomorrow morning, you are going to go to your bank. You are going to sign over full control of the diner to me. You are going to tell them it is for estate planning purposes, that you want your loving husband to be able to manage things if anything happens to you. And then you are going to disappear. I have a contact who specializes in helping people start over. New identity, new city, new life. You will never see anyone from your old life again, but you will be alive, which is more than my last business partner got." Felicia thought about Martin Graves swinging from a rope. She thought about how easily Craig spoke about death. "What if I refuse?" Craig shrugged. "Then my associates here will make sure you never refuse anything again, and I will forge your signature anyway. It is not hard. I have been doing it for years." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So what is it going to be, baby? New life or no life?" Felicia's mind raced. She needed to stall. She needed time. Dongju knew something was wrong. He would be looking for her. She just needed to survive long enough for him to find her. "I will do it," she said quietly. Craig raised an eyebrow. "That was easier than I expected. But I need something first." "What?" I want to know why. Why me? You could have targeted anyone. There are thousands of women with small businesses. Why go to all this trouble for a struggling soul food restaurant? Craig's expression shifted slightly. Just for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Because you were perfect, he said. Lonely woman running her dead grandmother's restaurant. No family, no close friends. No one who would ask too many questions when things went wrong. And there was something else, too. What? You were sad. I could see it the first time I walked into your restaurant. This deep sadness underneath all the smiles and the friendly service. Sad women are easy to manipulate. They want someone to fix their lives. They want to believe in love and happy endings. They trust too easily. He took a sip of his whiskey. I saw that sadness, and I knew you would be mine within a year. And I was right. Felicia felt sick. Every sweet moment of their early relationship now looked different. Every kind word, every thoughtful gesture, every time she had believed he was falling in love with her, it was all just a predator studying his prey. Get some rest, Craig said, standing up. Tomorrow is going to be a long day, and try not to do anything stupid. My friends are not gentle with people who cause problems. He walked toward the door, his two associates following behind him. Craig, Felicia called out. He paused. The man from my past, Dongju, he is going to find me. Craig laughed. Baby, I have been doing this for 15 years. No one has ever found me, and no one ever will. The door slammed shut behind him. She heard locks engaging. Heavy locks, multiple locks. She was alone. For about an hour, Felicia just sat in the chair, trying not to panic. The warehouse was cold and silent except for the occasional hum of electrical equipment. She could hear traffic somewhere in the distance, but it could have been coming from any direction. Then she felt something. A faint buzzing sensation against her left foot, coming from inside her sneaker. Her heart leaped. The tracking device. Dongju had given it to Yiwon to plant without telling her, in case something exactly like this happened. It was sewn into the sole of her shoe, invisible and undetectable unless you knew exactly what to look for. Hope flooded through her chest. Dongju knew where she was. He had to. That was the whole point of the tracker. He was coming for her. She just had to stay alive until he arrived. But her relief was short-lived. She heard footsteps outside the door. Heavy footsteps, getting closer. The lock clicked, the handle turned. Someone was coming in. And it was not Craig. The door swung open. Felicia scrambled backward, trying to stand despite her bound hands, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. But the figure that stepped through the doorway was not one of Craig's thugs. It was Yiwon. His face was as cold and expressionless as always, but his eyes softened slightly when he saw her. We need to move, he said. Now. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and cut through the zip ties with a knife that seemed to appear from nowhere. Felicia gasped as blood rushed back into her hands, the pins and needles almost painful. How did you find me? The tracker. Dongju had it active the moment he lost contact with you. We have been tracking your location for the past 4 hours. 4 hours? Why did you wait so long? We needed to know what we were dealing with. Craig has connections. We had to make sure we were not walking into a trap. He guided her through a maze of corridors she had not seen when Craig's men brought her in. They moved quickly and quietly, Yiwon checking every corner before motioning her forward. Where is Craig? He left about an hour ago, took his 2 associates with him. There were guards on the perimeter, but they have been neutralized. Neutralized. Yiwon did not elaborate. They reached a side door that led to a loading dock. The Arizona night was cool and clear, stars visible even through the ambient light of the city. Parked beside the dock was a black SUV with its engine running. Dongju was in the back seat. When Felicia climbed in, he did not say a word. He just took her hand and held it. His grip was warm and steady and incredibly comforting. I thought, she started. I know. His thumb traced gentle circles on her wrist. You are safe now. Craig cannot reach you where we are going." They drove for nearly 2 hours in silence. The city lights faded. The terrain became more rugged. Eventually, they pulled into a private estate somewhere in the hills of Paradise Valley. The house was enormous, modern architecture with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. A security team patrolled the perimeter. State-of-the-art cameras covered every angle. "You will stay here," Dongju said as they entered. "This property belongs to a friend, completely off the books. No connection to me or my organization. Even if Craig had resources, which he does not, he would never find this place." Felicia looked around at the expensive furniture, and the stunning views, and the armed men walking past the windows. "What happens now?" "Now you rest, you recover, and tomorrow we plan our next move." The next 3 days were strange and surreal. Felicia slept in a bed that probably cost more than her car. She ate food prepared by a private chef. She watched the sun set over the desert mountains from a terrace that felt like something out of a magazine. And slowly, she started to process everything that had happened. Her husband was a con artist and probably a murderer. The boy who had promised to marry her was now a crime lord. Her entire life had been built on lies she did not even know existed. It was a lot to take in. On the 4th day, Dongju showed her what his team had been working on. They had evidence, real, documented, legally admissible evidence. Bank records showing the forged signatures on her loan documents, financial trails connecting Craig to shell companies and offshore accounts, phone records proving his regular contact with known criminals. And perhaps most importantly, security footage from Martin Graves' apartment building on the day he died. The footage showed Craig arriving at the building at 2:47 p.m. It showed him leaving at 3:32 p.m. It showed no one else entering or leaving Martin's floor for the next 6 hours. It did not prove murder, but it destroyed Craig's alibi. And combined with everything else they had gathered, it was enough to launch a serious investigation. "We cannot go to the FBI directly," Dongju explained. "Craig has a contact inside the Phoenix field office, someone who has been helping him avoid prosecution for years. If we bring this evidence through normal channels, it will disappear." "So what do we do?" "We go around them. My contacts have identified the corrupt agent. We leak his involvement to his supervisors through anonymous channels. Once he is removed, we bring everything forward to someone we can trust." Felicia studied the documents spread out on the table. Her entire marriage, reduced to evidence in a criminal case. "How long?" "A week, maybe less." "And Craig?" Dongju's expression hardened. "Craig will not hurt anyone else, I promise you that." On the 5th day, everything changed. Dongju's team intercepted another phone call. This one was between Craig and someone at a storage facility on the outskirts of Tucson. Craig was planning to run. He knew Felicia had escaped. He knew someone powerful was helping her, and he had no intention of sticking around to face consequences. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what Craig said at the end of the call. "Burn the warehouse, and burn everything else too. I want no evidence left behind, including the other one." Felicia's blood went cold. "Other one," she whispered. Yi-Won rewound the recording and played it again. "Including the other one." Dongju's jaw tightened. "It sounds like you were not the only woman Craig was running this scheme on simultaneously." "What do you mean?" "We found evidence of 3 previous victims, but this suggests there might be someone current, someone else he targeted around the same time he targeted you. Someone who might still be alive." Yi-Won was already on his phone, issuing rapid orders in Korean. "We are checking the storage facility now," he reported. "If there is someone there, we will find them." 2 hours later, they had a name. Danielle Torres, 34 years old, former owner of a successful event planning business in Denver. She married Craig Hendricks 18 months ago in a quickie ceremony in Las Vegas. According to records, Danielle's business had been dissolved 6 months ago due to financial irregularities. She had been reported missing by her mother 3 months after that. Police had investigated briefly, but found no evidence of foul play. Danielle's bank accounts showed regular withdrawals in her home city. Her social media accounts posted occasional updates. Everyone assumed she had just walked away from her life. Everyone was wrong. The storage facility was on a dirt road outside Tucson, about 90 minutes south of Phoenix. It was the kind of place people rented when they needed to store things they did not want anyone to find. Remote, poorly lit, minimal security. Dongju brought a team of 8 men. They were armed. They were trained. They moved through the facility like shadows, clearing each unit before moving to the next. Felicia insisted on coming. "This is not your fight," Dongju said. "Craig used me to destroy other women's lives. It is absolutely my fight." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. "Stay behind Yiwon. Do exactly what he says." They found Danielle Torres in Unit 47. She was thin, pale, terrified. She had been held in the storage unit for nearly 4 months, surviving on bottled water and packaged food that Craig's associates delivered twice a week. The unit had been converted into a crude cell, a mattress on the floor, a bucket in the corner, a chain attached to a bolt in the concrete floor. When the door opened, and Danielle saw faces that were not her captors, she started screaming. It took several minutes to calm her down, to convince her that they were there to help, to get her to stop fighting and let them cut the chain. When she finally understood that she was being rescued, she collapsed into Felicia's arms and sobbed. "You got out," Danielle whispered through her tears. "He always said no one ever got out." They brought Danielle back to the Paradise Valley estate. She was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but the private doctor Dongju summoned said she would recover physically. The psychological recovery would take much longer. Over the next 2 days, Danielle told them everything she knew. She had met Craig at a business conference in San Diego. He was charming and attentive and seemed genuinely interested in her work. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, she was broke. Craig had done to her exactly what he had done to his other victims. He took control of her finances. He isolated her from friends and family. He drained her accounts and destroyed her credit. But when Danielle discovered what was happening and threatened to go to the police, Craig did not just divorce her. He made her disappear. "He said he learned from his mistakes," Danielle explained, her voice hollow. "The other women went to authorities after their divorces. They caused problems for him, so he decided to remove me from the equation entirely." "How did he keep you hidden for so long?" Felicia asked. "He had someone managing my digital presence, posting on social media, making withdrawals from ATMs near my apartment, answering texts from my mother. Everyone thought I was just being distant and difficult. No one had any reason to investigate." Danielle looked at Felicia with haunted eyes. "He was going to kill me eventually, once the statute of limitations ran out on some of his financial crimes. He told me that. He said it like he was discussing the weather, just a practical matter to be handled when the timing was right." But Danielle had more than just her own story to share. During her captivity, she had been conscious during many of Craig's phone calls. He was careless around her, treating her like furniture rather than a person capable of gathering information. She had names, dates, locations. She knew about the FBI contact who protected Craig. She knew about the offshore accounts where he hid his stolen money. And she knew where Craig was planning to run when things got too hot. "San Diego," she said. "He has a condo there under a fake name, near the Gaslamp Quarter. He called it his bolt hole, the place he goes when everything falls apart." Dongju looked at Yiwon. Something passed between them without words. "We move tonight," Dongju said. "Tonight, but we still do not have. Craig is planning to run. If we wait, we lose him. And if we lose him, he will start over somewhere else with some other woman. This ends now." He turned to Felicia. "You should stay here. It is going to be dangerous. Felicia shook her head. I want to be there. I need to see his face when it all falls apart. I need him to know that I won. Dongju hesitated. Please, Felicia said quietly. I need this. He nodded slowly. Fine, but you stay in the vehicle until we have him secured. No arguments. The convoy left Paradise Valley at midnight. San Diego was approximately 6 hours away. And Craig Hendricks had no idea what was coming for him. The convoy rolled into San Diego just before dawn. The city was still quiet. A few early joggers along the waterfront, delivery trucks making their rounds, the lights of the gas lamp quarter dimming as night gave way to day. Dongju's team had been preparing for this operation for the entire drive. They had blueprints of Craig's building. They had identified all exits. They had surveillance on the condo confirming that Craig was inside. The building was a modern high-rise near the harbor, expensive but anonymous, the kind of place where wealthy people came to disappear for a while. Craig's condo was on the 16th floor. There were 2 possible exits, the main elevator and a fire stairwell. Both were covered. Felicia waited in the SUV, watching through tinted windows as Dongju's men moved into position. Her heart was pounding. Her palms were sweating. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of lies. It was all about to end. Yi-Won led the entry team. They reached the 16th floor using the service elevator, avoiding the building's main security systems with a combination of technical expertise and well-placed bribes. The condo door came off its hinges with a single coordinated kick. Craig was sitting on his couch in a bathrobe, drinking coffee and watching the morning news. He had a packed suitcase beside him. He was planning to leave within the hour. He never got the chance. When 6 armed men burst into his living room, Craig's coffee cup shattered on the floor. His face went pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Who the hell are you? He finally managed. Dongju stepped through the doorway behind his men. I am the man from her past, the one you said had no power in this country. Craig's expression cycled through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, fear. This is illegal, he stammered. Breaking and entering, assault, I have rights. You have nothing. Dongju's voice was cold and flat. You are a con artist, a thief, and almost certainly a murderer. You have spent 15 years destroying women's lives and walking away without consequences. That ends today. Yi-Won handed Dongju a phone. The FBI director's personal assistant is on line 1. They are very interested in speaking with you. Craig's hands shook as he took the phone. You cannot do this. I have a contact. I have protection. Your contact is in federal custody as of 3 hours ago. We leaked evidence of his corruption to his supervisors yesterday. He is currently in an interrogation room explaining how he helped you evade prosecution for over a decade. Dongju leaned in close. Your protection is gone, Craig. Your offshore accounts have been frozen. Your fake identities have been flagged. Every escape route you carefully planned has been closed. You have exactly one option left. What option? You confess everything on the record. You testify against everyone involved in your operation, and you pray that the judge shows you mercy. Craig's face twisted with rage. And if I refuse? Dongju's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, something ancient and patient and utterly merciless. Then I will handle this my way, and I promise you, Craig, my way is much, much worse. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Craig's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him all at once, like air escaping a balloon. He talked. For 3 hours, he talked. He confessed to the financial fraud, walking through each scheme in detail. He admitted to forging signatures and creating fake documents. He described how he identified and targeted vulnerable women. And when they pressed him about Martin Graves, his face went gray. It was supposed to be simple, he said quietly. Martin knew too much. He was threatening to talk. I just wanted to scare him, make him understand what would happen if he opened his mouth. What happened? He panicked, tried to fight back. Things got out of control. Craig stared at his hands. I did not mean to kill him, it just happened. It was not a full confession to murder, but it was enough. Enough to reopen the investigation. Enough to charge him as a suspect. Enough to ensure that Martin Graves' death would not be written off as a suicide. By noon, Craig Hendricks was in FBI custody. The charges were still being compiled, but the preliminary list included wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder. He would be in prison for the rest of his life. Felicia watched from the SUV as Craig was led out of the building in handcuffs. He was still wearing his bathrobe. His hair was disheveled. He looked small and pathetic, and nothing like the charming man who had swept her off her feet 7 years ago. He saw her through the window. Their eyes met. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something, an apology, an explanation, some final manipulation to make her feel sorry for him. But before he could speak, the FBI agents pushed him into their vehicle. The door closed. He was gone. Dongju slid into the SUV beside her. "It is over," he said. Felicia shook her head slowly. "No, it is not." "What do you mean?" She turned to look at him, the boy who left, the man who came back, the stranger who had saved her life and destroyed the man who was destroying her. "You kept your promise. You came back for me. But 15 years is a long time, Dongju. I am not the same girl you left behind that alley, and you are not the same boy who left." She took a deep breath. "I need time to figure out who I am now, to decide what I want, to process everything that has happened." Dongju was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box, the same one he had left at her diner, the same ring he had carried for 15 years. "I will wait," he said. "However long it takes, I will wait." 3 months passed. Spring came to Scottsdale. The desert bloomed with wildflowers. The mountains turned green. And Felicia Monroe stood in front of Grandma Monroe's kitchen, watching construction workers put the finishing touches on a brand new sign. The diner was being rebuilt, better than before. She had used the evidence Dongju gathered to void all of Craig's forged documents. She had recovered a significant portion of the money he had stolen, seized from his offshore accounts, and returned to his victims. She had paid off the fraudulent loans and cleared her grandmother's legacy of all debt. She was starting over. The FBI investigation into Craig Hendricks had become one of the biggest white-collar crime cases in Arizona history. His FBI contact was facing charges of his own. The other women Craig had victimized were finally getting justice. Danielle Torres had reunited with her mother and was slowly rebuilding her life in Los Angeles. She called Felicia every week to check in. They had become friends, sisters in survival. And Dongju had kept his promise. He was waiting. He had returned to Seoul 3 weeks after Craig's arrest. He had business to handle, loose ends to tie up. An empire that required his attention. But he texted her every morning, just a simple message, "Thinking of you." And every morning, Felicia read that message and wondered if she was brave enough to give him another chance. The diner reopened on a Saturday in April. It was packed from the moment the doors opened. The whole neighborhood showed up. People who remembered Felicia's grandmother and her famous fried chicken. People who had read about the case in the newspapers and wanted to support a local business. People who just wanted good food and a warm atmosphere. By closing time, Felicia was exhausted but happy, genuinely happy. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. She was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and saw a familiar face. Dongju was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a simple gray shirt and jeans. No suit, no security team, no convoy of armored vehicles, just him. "I heard you were reopening," he said. "I wanted to be here." Felicia stared at him. "You flew from Seoul for my grand reopening." "I would fly around the world for you, Felicia. I thought you knew that by now." She felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them back. The kitchen is closed. I did not come for the food. They sat in the empty diner after everyone else had gone home. The same diner where everything began. The same diner where Dongju had walked back into her life and turned everything upside down. Outside, the Scottsdale night was quiet and still. Inside, the air was thick with everything they had not said to each other. I have been thinking, Felicia said slowly, her fingers tracing patterns on the worn countertop. About what? About us, about what we were, about what we could be, about whether it is too late for any of it. Dongju waited. He did not push. He did not try to fill the silence with promises or persuasion. He just sat there, patient and present, giving her the space to find her words. Felicia looked at him, the boy who had shivered behind the dumpster, the man who commanded empires, the stranger who had become familiar again over these past months of texts and phone calls and careful, cautious conversations. Is it too late, Dongju? After everything that has happened, after all these years, after everything you have become and everything I have been through. Dongju reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused and real. It is never too late, he said. Not for us, not ever. How can you be so sure? Because I have spent 15 years building a life that could be worthy of you, and I have spent the last 3 months watching you rebuild yours. You are stronger than you know, Felicia, braver than you believe, and more beautiful than you were when we were 17, which I did not think was possible. Felicia laughed through her tears. You are ridiculous. I am honest. There is a difference. She squeezed his hand. I am scared, Dongju. I trusted Craig and he nearly destroyed me. How do I know this is different? How do I know you will not disappear again? Dongju was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and serious. I cannot promise that I will never make mistakes. I cannot promise that my world will not sometimes be complicated and difficult. But I can promise you this, I will never lie to you. I will never hide from you. And I will never, ever leave you again. Not unless you ask me to go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. The same ring, the same promise, waiting for 15 years to be fulfilled. You do not have to answer now, he said. You do not have to answer ever if you are not ready. But I want you to know that this ring has been waiting for you since we were 17, and it will wait as long as you need it to. Felicia took the box. She held it in her hands. She looked at the ring inside, the simple gold band and the tiny diamond that a desperate teenage boy had saved months to afford. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that love was not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day. She thought about Danielle and the other women Craig had destroyed, and how close she had come to being just another victim. She thought about the girl who had fed a hungry stranger behind a dumpster and never expected anything in return. And she thought about Dongju, not the powerful man he had become, but the broken boy he had been, the boy who had promised to come back, the boy who had kept that promise against all odds. She opened the box and looked at the ring. Then she slipped it onto her finger. Yes, she said quietly. Dongju stared at her. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will take a chance on us. Yes, I believe that 15 years apart does not have to mean the end of our story. It can mean the beginning of something new. For the first time since she had known him, Dongju looked speechless. Then he stood up, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. It was not like their first kiss, soft and sad and full of goodbye. This kiss was fierce and joyful and full of promise. This kiss was hello. This kiss was forever. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. I love you, Dongju said. I have loved you since I was 17 years old. I have loved you through poverty and power and everything in between. I will love you until the day I die. I love you too, Felicia whispered. I never stopped, I just forgot how to admit it. 6 months later, autumn came to Scottsdale. The mountains turned gold and orange. The air grew crisp and cool. And Felicia Monroe stood in front of a mirror, wearing a simple white dress, preparing to marry the love of her life. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the courtyard of a beautiful estate overlooking the desert, Only 30 guests, close friends. Survivors from Craig's schemes who had become like family. A few of Dongju's most trusted associates looking slightly uncomfortable in formal attire. Yi-won was the best man. He stood beside Dongju at the altar, his expression as stoic as ever, though Felicia could swear she saw him smile when she walked down the aisle. Danielle Torres was there with her mother, both of them crying happy tears. The other women Craig had victimized had sent flowers and messages of congratulation. A sisterhood built on shared survival. When Felicia walked down the aisle, Dongju's eyes never left her face. 15 years of waiting. 15 years of working and fighting and hopping. It all came down to this moment. The ceremony was simple, traditional vows, nothing elaborate or showy. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, there was a brief moment of tension. Old habits died hard, but the moment passed without incident. "I do," Dongju said, his voice steady and strong. "I do," Felicia echoed, her voice thick with emotion. They exchanged rings. The simple gold band with the tiny diamond went on Felicia's finger, right where she had placed it 6 months ago in the empty diner. A matching band went on Dongju's finger, solid and permanent. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Dongju kissed his bride. The guests cheered. And somewhere Felicia was sure her grandmother was smiling. The reception was held on the terrace as the sun set over the desert. Good food, good music, good company. Felicia danced with her new husband and felt lighter than she had in years. "What happens now?" she asked as they swayed to a slow song. "Anything we want." That is not an answer. Dongju smiled. "I have been thinking about stepping back from some of my business interests, transferring more responsibility to Yi-won and my other lieutenants, spending more time here, more time with you." "You would do that, give up everything you built." "I built it for you, Felicia, all of it. Every decision, every sacrifice, every long night and difficult choice. It was all so I could become someone worthy of standing beside you. Now that I have you, the rest is just details." Felicia rested her head on his shoulder. "I want to expand the diner, open more locations, bring my grandmother's recipes to more people. Then we will do that, together. And I want to help other women, women like Danielle, women who get trapped by men like Craig. There has to be something we can do." Dongju nodded slowly. "There is a lot we can do, resources, legal support, safe houses, whatever it takes." "Is that realistic?" "Felicia, I have spent 15 years learning how to make the impossible happen. This is just another project, a better one than most." She looked up at him. "You really have changed, have you not?" "I have. You changed me. You changed me when we were 17, and you changed me again when you gave me a second chance. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." On their second wedding anniversary, Dongju took Felicia to Cleveland. The old neighborhood had changed. Gentrification had transformed the rough streets into trendy boutiques and coffee shops, but some things remained the same. They found the alley behind where her grandmother's original restaurant used to stand. The dumpster was still there, rusted and forgotten. Nobody else would have looked twice at it. But for Dongju and Felicia, it was sacred ground. Dongju knelt down and ran his hand over the cracked concrete. "This is where you saved my life. This is where you saw a starving stranger and chose kindness instead of fear." Felicia knelt beside him. "And this is where you promised to come back." He looked at her, his eyes wet. She had only seen him cry twice in all the years she had known him, when he talked about his parents, and now. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "You kept your promise," she agreed. She took his hand, the hand that had done difficult things in difficult circumstances, the hand that had also protected her, saved her, loved her unconditionally. "We made it, Dongju. We made it." They stood together in that dirty alley as the sun set over Cleveland. Two people who had found each other against all odds. Two people who had survived loss and betrayal and 15 years of separation. Two people who had refused to give up on a promise made behind a dumpster by a starving boy and a kind girl. The ring on Felicia's finger caught the fading light. Simple, beautiful, perfect. Just like the love story that made it possible. Grandma Monroe's kitchen expanded to 12 locations over the next 5 years. The Monroe Foundation, which Felicia and Dongju created together, helped over 200 women escape abusive and exploitative relationships. Craig Hendricks died in federal prison 4 years into his sentence. Heart attack. Nobody mourned him. Danielle Torres remarried a kind man who adored her. She sent Felicia a picture of her wedding day with a simple note. "Thank you for giving me my life back." And Dongju Park, the boy who lost everything and built an empire to keep a promise, finally found the peace he had been searching for his entire adult life. Not in power, not in wealth, not in the respect of dangerous men. In a small diner in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the arms of the woman who had saved him when he was nothing, in the simple, profound miracle of being loved and loving in return. Some promises take 15 years to keep. Some promises are worth every single day of waiting.